Assalamualaikum. We are in lab exercise 7, whereby we will continue from the project that we have created in lab exercise 6. See, now we have our student DB SQL Server database. So what we are going to do now is that we are going to actually create a form that can display the content of the database onto the form. Okay, so the first thing that we must do is that we will create a new form. So what we will do is that we click to the project. Okay, add. So we add new web form. Okay, let's say that we just take the name Webform1 for our form. Okay, now this is Webform1. So similarly, I will delete this div. So what we are going to do next is that we go to our toolbox. So I'm going to actually pin the toolbox here. Okay, this is the standard toolbox. So now I'm going to actually close this, collapse this. Okay, now look at data. So here is data. So the first thing that we must do is that we are going to actually connect our web form to our SQL Server database. So what I can do here is that I'm going to actually go to the design view again. Okay, I'm going to for the data. Okay, so this is the data. To connect the web form to the database, we need to use this SQL data source. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to drag and drop. So we can drag and drop this anywhere, whether this is in the form or anywhere. Okay, it does not matter. So let's say I just click this here. Okay. Now this is SQL data source. So if I am to look at the source, now this is the source. Okay, you will notice that there is a tag here. The class is SQL data source. Okay, the ID by default is SQL data source 1. So you can name whatever the ID that you choose, but I'm going to retain the default name here. And then this is the SQL data source. So how do we configure our SQL data source so that it can connect to our SQL Server database, which is studentdb.mdf. Okay, we want to connect this SQL data source to studentdb.mdf. So what you can do is that go to the design. Okay, when you hover onto this particular control, you will notice there is a small button here, and there is configure data source. So click configure data source. The display will ask you to choose your data connection. Which data connection should your application use to connect to the database? Okay, so here we can choose, because there is only one database within our project, so we choose studentdb.mdf. Okay, now we can see if we click this connection string. So this is what we call the connection string. Okay, this is the connection string. Okay, so this is just for viewing purposes. Okay, we click next. We need to give a connection name, and this name will be included in the web config. Okay, now it then asks, do you want to save the connection in the application configuration file? So the application configuration file is this web config file. Okay, so basically by default it will give a name connection string. So I'm going to give a more specific name to this. Okay, so I'm not going to use connection string. So the name of this connection is studentCon. So I click next. Okay, the next step is to configure the select statement. So here you will notice that we can select which table that we want to display onto the form. So for the purpose of this example, so I am going to select TBL students, only one table first. Later on, we will see how do we connect multiple tables. So TBL students, and here it will list all of these columns within the table. Okay, now here by default it will select all. So this is, you see the star. You can also choose very specific columns that you want to display, and you will see that this is the select statement. Okay, but for the purpose of this example, I'm going to select all. We click next. Okay, here we can test the query. So let's say that I'm going to test the query. This is the output that we will get if we choose this particular select statement. So let's say that I click finish. Okay, now let us have a look at our source. Okay, you will notice that, okay, now this is quite long. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to actually just enter this into separate lines so that you can see more clearly, okay, the commands. Okay, now this is the SQL data source. Okay, now the ID is SQL data source 1. We have run at server. Okay, now this is what we call the connection string. Okay, you have this part. This refers to the entry within the web config, which refers to a connection string, and the name of the connection string is studentcon. So we will look at the web config after this. Now, this is actually the select command, meaning that the select command that we use to actually display the result, which is select all from TBL students. Okay, let us look at our web config. Let's say I double click our web config. Okay, you will notice that we have within these connection strings, okay, there is an entry. Okay, the name of the connection string is studentcon, and the reference, the connection string, is actually this one. Okay, this is the same one when we actually display the connection string in the wizard. So this is the connection string. Okay, let me close this. Okay, now this is the first part whereby you include the SQL data source. Now, meaning that this particular web form has a connection to our database, which is the studentDB. Okay, so this is the studentDB, and the connection name now is studentcon. Okay, this is the connection name. The database name remains as studentdb.mdf. Okay, we can use several controls here to display the output. Okay, now let me use, for the first one, I'm going to use what we call a grid view. A grid view is a display that is similar to a spreadsheet. So what we do is that we just drag and drop. Once we drag and drop this, it will display an option for you to use. Okay, now this is the source. Now this is the grid view. By default, the ID is grid view 1. So I will retain the default name. So currently there's no setting here, there's nothing here, so it does not display anything. Currently, these are two different controls and each does not connect to another. So to connect this grid view 1 to this SQL data source 1, okay, what I'll do is that I click on this grid view. Okay, you see this small button? Click this. Okay, now there is choose data source. Click. Now we only have SQL data source 1, so we select SQL data source 1. Now look at the source. Using the wizard, it will automatically write for you the necessary ASP.NET tags for you to display each column within the table. Okay, you will see that there is bound field, data field, and so on. Okay, so let us go here. Okay, so what we are going to do now is that I'm going to actually run this. So this is the output using the grid view. You can see that these are all the columns that the data is taken from the TBL student table from the studentdb.mdf database. Okay, this is to display the data within the database. So can we actually do some editing to this particular data using the grid view? So the answer is yes. What we can do is that we go to the SQL data source. Okay, click configure data source. Okay, so here we just click next. Okay, you will notice that there is this advanced. If we choose to allow inserting, updating, and deleting, so we click this button. Okay, now the condition for you to be able to do this is that it must be based on just a single table. So meaning that you cannot combine table and then generate, insert, update, and delete. That is the first condition. The second condition is that the table must have a primary key. So the process of inserting, updating, and deleting is based on the key. So if your table does not have a primary key, this will be great, meaning that you cannot click this one. Okay, so now leave this alone. So we click OK, and then we click next, and then we click finish. Here we have actually changed the SQL data source. Now if we have a look at SQL data source now it adds several more tags. First we have delete parameters, we have insert parameters, and we have update parameters. Okay, now let us go back to the design view. What we have done is that we have changed the SQL data source to allow insert, update, and delete. Next, you need to change some configuration setting to this grid view. So what you need to do is click on this grid view, click this small button, and you will notice that there are some other options here. Let's say that I check enable paging, enable sorting, enable editing, and enable deleting. Okay, for selection, this is not really important at this point of time. If you go to the source, this is for the grid view. Okay, you will notice that there is an addition of allow paging, allow sorting, and so on. Okay, this code has been included within the source. Now let us go back to this. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to run this. Okay, let's say that I'm going to sort this according alphabetical order. This is sorted in ascending order. So here, if I am to sort the student ID, if I am to sort the sex code, okay, and so on. So this is the sorting. Okay, if I am to edit some information, so let's say that I'm going to edit here. Okay, now Siti Sarah is Siti Sarah Shamsul. Here I update. You will notice that this has been updated, and this will update the content of the table within the database. Okay, so here if you click this, it will delete the whole row. So I'm not going to delete this, but if you delete this, it will delete the whole row. So this is editing. So if I am to change back to the original one, okay, so I click update. Okay, so this is, you have some of this. Okay, within grid view, you cannot insert a new row. You can only edit and you can only delete. So this is using the grid view. So if you want to insert new data, you must use a different type of control.